For this problem, we are going to solve the equation by completing the square. Now, do keep in mind that whenever you are given quadratic equations, any technique to solve a quadratic equation, factoring, square root property, completing the square, quadratic formula, all of those techniques are still valid on all quadratic equations. This one here can technically be factored. That is the simpler technique, my go-to technique. If you can factor it, definitely factor it. So I am going to show how to do this problem using completing the square. So, first things first, when completing the square, the first thing you want to make sure your equation is in quadratic form. You want your leading coefficient to be a 1. So if it's not a 1, let's say you have a 2 here in front, you want to go ahead and divide the entire equation by whatever that coefficient is to get rid of it. Now, we don't have to worry about that for this problem. Second step, what you want to do is you want to take your constant and you want to move it over to the other side. Kick it over to the other side. So for us, that's going to be that 3. We're going to subtract it to get x squared plus 4x. We're going to leave a space here, and that's going to equal that negative 3. Next step in completing the square, there's this little mini formula that we use every single time with completing the square. 1/2 times b squared. And we need to calculate that. And whatever value we get here, we're actually going to add that into our equation on either side here. This value is going to allow us to factor this problem nice and pretty. So, 1/2 b. Keep in mind, b is your middle term, so for us it is a 4. So half of 4 is a 2, and 2 squared is 4. So we are going to add 4 to either side of our equation. That number is going to allow us to factor this nice and pretty, so we should get a binomial squared here. On the left-hand side, do notice when we factor this x squared gives us x times x. Factors of 4 that add or subtract to get 4 is going to be a 2 and a 2, right? 2 times 2 is 4, 2 plus 2 is 4. Everything's positive here, so everything is positive in the problem. Notice we do have the same exact factor here. This should happen every single time with this technique. And since they're both the same, we're going to say that we just have x plus 2 squared is equal to, remember our right side over here, we move that negative 3 over, we're adding a 4, that gives us a 1. Finish solving this problem using the square root property here. On the left-hand side, we have an exponent. Opposite of a square is a square root, so we are going to take the square root of each side. That is going to cancel the square root and the square on the left-hand side, leaving us with x plus 2. On the right-hand side, the square root of 1 is a plus or minus 1. Otherwise, to wrap this problem up, subtract that 2 on each side, and over here we're going to have x is equal to the negative 2 plus or minus 1. Actually calculate this. This means negative 2 plus 1, and then the negative 2 minus 1. Remember that that represents two different numbers there, positive 1 and negative 1. Calculate both of these real quick. Those are your two solutions. Negative 2 plus 1 gives us a negative 1. Negative 2 minus 1 gives us a negative 3. So x equals negative 1 and x equals a negative 3.